Yeah. Okay, so we are now on our third topic of today. This is a wonderful parachurch organization. No, it's not YWAM. It's not Crew. It's not IVCF. It is a group.
Oasis Center.
No, it is called the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. So the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. These are much more commonly known as the Knights Templar. I am going to do this a little bit different. This is the entry from the
Is Emily out there?
from War and Religion, an Encyclopedia of Faith and Conflict, Volume 2. This was published in 2017. I was a contributor to this, and I wrote the article on the Fourth Crusade, so I can get that for you. I wrote the article on the Third Crusade, the Venetian Crusade, which is very fascinating, though very esoteric. And I wrote the entry on the Knights Templar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read each paragraph. It's only about 3 pages long, so we'll try to keep this short, and I'll kind of add a commentary as I go along. All of these PDFs, you can get them at my academia.edu website. So go to academia.edu, look up Dwayne Miller, and you can subscribe to my stuff. And most of my scholarship is available at academia.edu, including all of these different entries that I wrote for the Encyclopedia of Faith and Conflict. It was a brilliant and enjoyable project to work on this with the editors of the 3 volumes. The Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon were a military religious order whose charism, a charism is like a calling, like that's what they're devoted to, right? It's like their main reason for existing. Whose charism was assisting Christians in making a pilgrimage to the Holy Land during the era of the Crusades. Known popularly as the Knights Templar, this initially involved providing armed escorts to pilgrims. As we said previously, sometimes this whole pilgrimage thing was quite dangerous. So these people wanted to assist people in their spiritual formation and growth by making sure that they could do these spiritual things safely. As the order grew rapidly in numbers, fame, and wealth, this eventually led to maintaining fortifications through the Levant and in Iberia, and their participation in numerous battles. A lot of these fortifications still exist today. If you have been to Acre, the fortress walls of Acre were built by the Templars. There are a number of castles and fortresses throughout the Levant, the most famous of which is called Tortosa, which is named after a city in Spain, but it's a huge castle that is in ruins in the Levant. The founder. Very little is known of Hugh de Payne, a knight from Champagne and the founder of the religious order. So when we speak of religious orders, this is like the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Augustinians. Luther was one of those. It's a religious order. After the successful conquest of Jerusalem in the First Crusade, a community of 9 knights resolved to stay in Jerusalem to assist pilgrims in making pilgrimage, as this could be a dangerous activity, especially for those who wished to visit the holy sites near the River Jordan. That was the border area, so that was particularly dangerous. So in 1120, during the reign of Baldwin II, king of Jerusalem, Hugh and his companions made a vow to defend the kingdom of Jerusalem. Baldwin II accepted their pledge of aid and provided for them a portion of Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was then erroneously supposed to be part of the Temple of Solomon, hence the popular title of Knights Templar. At this humble initial stage, they begged for alms, aka they raised support, and provided guarded escorts for pilgrims. They were indeed poor knights. So let's do a little bit of geography or topography of Jerusalem. You have the Temple Mount, right, which is where the temple used to be built. The Christians, during this period, during the earlier period, the Byzantine period, the Christians thought it was haunted, so they didn't do anything or build anything up there, or haunted or cursed, They didn't do anything or build anything up there. The Muslims come in, they lay the city under siege. Sophronius, the patriarch, eventually goes out and lets them come in and surrenders the city after months of starvation and disease. And he comes in, and he's invited to go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. He says, no, if I go in there and I say prayers, we'll have to make it a mosque. So he goes up to the Temple Mount, and that's where they build a shrine. The Dome of the Rock is a shrine. It is not a mosque. It is a shrine. It is built in an octagonal shape, designed by a Greek Christian architect, built by Greek Christian builders. So that is why it looks like a Greek Christian, Greek Orthodox martyrion, which is a shrine that was built over the body of a martyr, 8 sides with a dome. That is the architecture of the dome on the rock. It is not Islamic architecture. It is Greek Christian architecture, although it has Arabic Islamic inscriptions. Okay. And then also near that shrine, they build the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That is there to this day. And this is what they're talking about here, where that part of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is also there on that kind of big platform that Herod had built, that a big embankment that holds that up, that's the western wall. That's the last part remaining of the architecture or the engineering that helped to build Herod's temple. And so that is by the Jews today considered to be a synagogue, even though it's a wall. Well, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is up there. Al-Aqsa means furthermost. This is, of course, where supposedly Muhammad in his nighttime journey comes and touches his toe down. That's where the shrine is, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque is next to it. They think that's the Temple of Solomon. Bad archaeologists. So that's why they get the Knights Templar. It's a mistake. They're poor knights. They won't be poor for that long, by the way, but they're poor knights at this point. So the innovative marriage, and this is brilliant. These guys managed to bring together 2 of the most powerful, dynamic sources of identity and imagination that exist. That no one had done that before. So you want to talk about innovation. Here it is. The innovative marriage of 2 of the great ideals of Christendom, chivalry and holiness, was compelling and attracting to many. Hugh traveled to Europe to seek official ecclesiastical recognition. Like Patrick, like Boniface, right? They have their own thing. They've already started it, but they want to make sure that they get the permission and the thumbs up from the powers that be, and to get new recruits, and was successful on both accounts. He attended the Council of Troyes in 1129, where he met the enormously influential and dynamic Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Bernard was a key promoter of the Crusades and would pen a letter praising the Knights Templar, De Laude Novae Militiae, in praise of the new soldiers or army. Up to that point, the Templars had no specific habit. Okay, remember, or different orders wear different habits. But at Troyes, the Rule of Benedict, this is the oldest rule in Europe, that was Benedict of Nursia, 6th century, bringing those ideas from Antony of Egypt that we talked about last week. So they adopt that white habit, but with a red cross on it. And they accept the 3 evangelical vows, which are poverty, chastity, and obedience, and beside the original vow to protect the Holy Land. I've also read some sources that said that they took the vow of temperance, or a vow of moderation, such that they could never finish the last morsel of food on their plate. So that would actually make sense for soldiers living in pretty difficult places where food was scarce. After this, the white habit of Cistercian monks, Cistercians are a reform of the Benedictine order, with the red cross became the typical dress of the knights. Pope Innocent II recognized the Templars as a military order of the Church in 1139. Trivia: are there any military orders of the Church, of the Catholic Church, that still exist today? Yes.
Yeah.
The Sovereign Military Order of Malta. It still exists today. It is the descendant of the Knights of Malta, which come from the Knights of Rhodes, which come from the Knights of St. John, the Knights Hospitallers of St. John, who go back to this period of time. The Knights Templar don't exist anymore, but we'll get to that later. The Templars were taken under the direct protection of the Pope, making them exempt from any other secular or ecclesiastical jurisdiction. This is because their mission and their charism, their work, is considered to be so important. The Pope says, I am going to directly supervise this. I'm not going to leave this up to other bishops and dukes and whatever. No, you guys report directly to the top. So that's just to give you an idea of their importance. This, of course, is going to really make people upset, right? If you're the local bishop or archbishop or duke, you're like, what is this? You guys can just do whatever you want and report directly to Rome. Like, you don't have to get my okay to do these things. So that's going to backfire a little bit. While secular clergy in the Holy Land, secular clergy, that sounds like a weird thing, but in the Roman Catholic Church, secular priests are just regular priests. They're under their bishop. They don't belong to the Franciscans, Dominicans, Poor Knights, Knights Hospitaller, or anything like that. The secular clergy, who don't belong to a religious order, were not always pleased with the power of the Templars and other military orders. The popes of Rome affirmed the Templar privileges. They also received numerous gifts, that's the Templars, from royal patrons and established commanderies throughout France, Britain, Italy, the Low Countries, and Spain, where they aided in the Reconquista. Eventually, to these would be added even more properties in Germany, Poland, Hungary, and Ireland. It's an amazing real estate portfolio. They also established or fortified positions in the Holy Land. Famous among them are Safed, built in 1140, and the coastal Castle Pilgrim. Google that, beautiful photos of it, built in 1217. Ruins of Templar fortifications remain visible throughout the Levant to this day. These constructions were simultaneously military fortifications and convents, or monasteries, convents for men. The majority of Templars were laymen, who were divided into knights and sergeants, which were heavy and light cavalry, respectively. There were also a rank of non-military chaplains. The chaplains alone among the three ranks were ordained priests, and their concern was to minister to the spiritual and sacramental needs of the other ranks and also the pilgrims. In terms of authority, it was generally the knights who held the top positions, including the highest position, which was Grand Master of the temple. But Templar convents, fortifications, would usually have other people residing in or near them. And by the way, the ordained priests, they did not fight. Okay, the monks, the brothers, the sergeants, and whatever, they could fight, but the priests did not fight. The average Templar fortification would usually have a number of other people living in or near them. Servants, both Muslim and Christian mercenaries, and visiting pilgrims. In spite of their fame and wealth, the Templars could not summon more than a few hundred knights in the Holy Land at any given time. They were generally considered to be excellent warriors and often did fight to the death because they were rarely allowed to be ransomed if captured during battle. Few of the Templars were from royal or noble families. I have an example of the ferocity of the Templars in battle, but we're going to skip over that. In keeping with their original and perpetual vocation of assisting Christians to make a pilgrimage, the Templars became instrumental in the development of international banking. Pilgrims would deposit funds at a Templar treasury in Europe and then be able to withdraw funds in the Holy Land. In practice, this system was a precursor to the modern traveler's check. They also became involved in money lending, including to European royalty. After the fall of Jerusalem to Salah ad-Din in 1187, the Grand Master operated from Acre, so that's just north of Haifa in what is today Israel, and after the fall of that city in 1291 from Cyprus. Did you guys know that Czech, it comes from an Arabic word? One of the English words, it comes from Arabic. In common with other medieval religious orders, the Templars became objects of criticism. First, for a community of poor knights of Christ, they had become very wealthy. Second, despite their courage and military skill, they had not been able to withstand the advance of militant Islam led by the Mamluk sultans of Egypt. So this is the fall of Acre. Third, there was destructive rivalry between Templars and other military orders, most notably the Hospitallers, the Knights Hospitaller of St. John. Again, there's that thing when Christians are divided against each other. I mean, it's a bad recipe. In response to the third complaint, the amalgamation of the military orders was discussed at the Second Council of Lyon in 1274, but this was never implemented. That is, somebody said, let's go ahead and just combine all these military orders into one, so that way they can stop fighting. They decided they wanted to do that, but it never actually happened. So let's take a moment to pause here. What you have is let's say a church mission, if you will, a ministry that had a very dynamic founding, that grew very quickly, that became very wealthy and influential and powerful. But they had lost their first and their main reason for existing. Are there any missionaries, churches, mission organizations, mission agencies today that had a great and glorious history, but their main reason for existing has in some way collapsed or been nullified? I don't have any particular group or people or denomination or mission society.
YMCA.
The YMCA. What great Islamic community was modeled on the YMCA in Egypt in the 20th century? The Muslim Brotherhood. They looked at the YMCA and said, "Hey, we can do that. We're going to use Islam though instead of Christianity." So the YMCA has left a great heritage in the form of the Muslim Brotherhood. Great in terms of influential, not in terms of necessarily helpful. Okay. So the confluence of these factors, right? All these factors, right? That they've got a lot of money. They're not poor knights anymore. They have amazing influence. They don't have local accountability because they're still directly accountable only to the Pope himself in Rome. The confluence of these factors allowed King Philip IV of France, Philip the Fair, they said he was handsome, who reigns until 1314, to initiate an inquiry into the order, probably with the aim of obtaining the Templars' wealth to relieve his government's financial difficulties. Secret orders were sent out to arrest all Templars in his land on Friday the 13th of 1307. This is where that idea that Friday the 13th is bad luck comes from. This is it. On charges of sexual and blasphemous crimes committed during secret rituals. Scandalous. Yeah. As no material evidence of these crimes existed, the arrested were subjected to torture, which was pretty standard for the day. And some of the brothers, surprise, confessed to the alleged crimes. Even the Grand Master of the Order, Jacques de Molay, confessed. The entire inquest had been carried out illegally, though, because did this guy have authority, even as the King of France, to do this sort of thing? No. They were directly accountable only to the Pope. So Philip did not have the authority to investigate such matters, much less to arrest and torture these guys. Because of this, Pope Clement V declared the whole Inquisition null and void. Inquisition means it's an inquiry. We still have these today. The Inquisition, today we call them an inquest. It's a gathering of evidence before a trial. This is a very important development in the history of jurisprudence. An inquisition is today an inquest. You're gathering evidence before you do trials. Good. Furthermore, and so that the Pope decides to do this, there's a lot of pressure on him. So the Pope says, okay, I have authority to do this. I'm going to do another inquest or inquisition. The Templars were found innocent in many regions like Cyprus, Germany, and Spain. It seemed clear that some individual Templars had committed crimes, but the main question was at a higher level. Did there exist a secret doctrine or ritual for the entire order that condemned the entire order, or the order as a whole? The Council of Vion, this is an ecumenical council for the entire Catholic Church, was held in 1311 through 1312. In summary, they don't condemn the Templars of any kind of doctrinal error for the whole body. But the Pope, who is being pressured at this time, he says, well, just because this is causing public scandal, we're going to dissolve the Knights Templar. On March 22nd, 1312, Clement V issued the bull, Vox in excelso, whereby the order was suppressed. In it, the Pope cited allegations, again, they're just allegations, of idol worship and explained that as a vicar of Christ, he was forced by public scandal, right? We haven't actually found anything that these people are guilty of, but it's a public scandal, so I'm going to suppress the Templars anyway. And furthermore, since the order no longer could continue in its principal mission of securing the Holy Land, the properties of the order must be distributed to other orders and persons for the good of the Church. Here's the final story, and we'll wrap up with this about the Knights Templar. One of the most famous stories related to the Templars is that of the immolation, when he's burned, of the last Grand Master of the Temple, Jacques de Molay. De Molay had confessed his sins and was to be reconciled to the Church upon public confession of these sins. This was to be carried out in front of the Cathedral Church of Paris, Notre Dame. But at the last minute he recanted his confession and proclaimed his own innocence, the innocence of the entire order, and the falsity of the allegations made against it. For his failure in falsely confessing under torture, he announced he would atone by sacrificing his own life. King Philip arrested him as a relapsed heretic and instructed him to be burned, and instructed that he should be burned alive, which sentence was carried out in March 1314. Some of the people of Paris had been deeply affected by de Molay's courage and zeal, and the story spread that the Grand Master had called for King Philip and Pope Clement V to meet him before the judgment throne of God. Within the year. That is so exciting. Within the year, to account for their treachery against the Knights Templar. It is impossible historically to either verify or disprove the historicity of this tale. However, both Clement and Philip were dead within the year. The Pope died on April 20th, 1314, and the King died on November 29th, 1314. The Knights Templar ceased to exist. The properties and knights in Portugal and Aragon were designated to two new orders, the Order of Christ and the Order of Montesa, still exists today, the Order of Montesa, respectively. Some of the knights went back to ordinary lay life, and many were sent to monasteries to do penance for the alleged but unsubstantiated crimes of their orders. And there is no historical evidence connecting the Knights Templar to a group of Freemasons who call themselves the Templars. So, what do you guys think of the poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon?